The night was cold in King's Landing, but not as cold as the silence between old friends. Ned Stark stood near the balcony of the Tower of the Hand, looking down at the city. The torches burned like little stars in the dark streets. Somewhere far away, music and laughter echoed from the feast hall. But inside Ned's heart there was no music, only worry. Robert Baratheon sat behind him, drinking heavily from a golden cup. His loud laughter from earlier had now turned into angry muttering. "She thinks I don't see it," Robert growled. "She thinks I'm a fool." Ned slowly turned around. "Who, Your Grace?" Robert slammed the cup on the table. Wine spilled like blood across the map of Westeros. "Cersei, your queen, my wife." Ned's face stayed calm, but inside he felt a storm rising. He had seen the way Cersei looked at her brother Jaime. He had heard whispers in the court, and he had already begun to suspect something terrible. "You don't trust her," Ned said quietly. Robert laughed bitterly. "Dropped. I never trusted her, but I married her for peace, for her father's gold. That was the deal." He looked at Ned with tired eyes. "You think I was wrong?" Ned stepped closer. This was the moment. In another path he might have stayed silent, but not tonight. "Yes," Ned said firmly, "you were wrong." The room went silent. Robert stared at him, shocked. No one spoke to the king like that. No one spoke to the king like that. No one dared. But Ned Stark was not like other men. "You forget yourself, Stark," Robert warned, though his voice was weak. "I remember who I am," Ned replied, "and I remember who you were. You were not a man who married for gold. You were not a man who closed his eyes to danger." Robert stood up slowly. "Danger? From my own queen." Ned walked to the table and pointed at the map. "The Lannisters are everywhere. Your Kingsguard, your council, the gold cloaks, even your wine is poured by their men. If Cersei cannot control you with love, she will control you with power." Robert's face turned red, not from wine, but from anger. "Are you saying she plots against me?" "I am saying you are blind if you think she doesn't." The words hit like a hammer. Robert paced the room. His heavy boots echoed loudly. "I've known you since we were boys. You would not say this without reason. What do you know?" Ned hesitated. He thought of Jon Arryn, the former hand of the king, who had died suddenly. He remembered the book about the great houses and their children. Black hair, always black hair, except for Joffrey, except for Tommen, except for Marcella. "They are not yours," Ned said finally. Robert froze. "What? Your children? They do not carry your blood." The air felt heavy. Even the torches seemed to flicker in fear. Robert's voice became dangerously soft. "Explain." Ned swallowed. "Baratheons are known for black hair, always. But Joffrey, Tommen, Marcella, all golden like the Lannisters. Like Jaime." Robert's breathing became rough. "You accuse my wife of treason." "I accuse her of betrayal," Ned answered. "And if it is true, it is more than betrayal. It is treason against the throne." Robert picked up his sword from the wall, not to attack Ned, but because he needed something strong to hold. His hands were shaking. "For years," Robert whispered, "I thought I was just unlucky, that the gods cursed me with weak sons." He laughed darkly. "But you are saying they are not my sons at all." "I am saying you must find the truth before it destroys you," Ned replied. Robert looked at his old friend. "And what would you have me do? Kill her? Kill the children?" Ned's face hardened. "I would have you act like a king, not a drunk man hiding from his problems." That hurt. Robert knew it. Silence filled the room again. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Finally, Robert put the sword down. "If what you say is true, then I have been living a lie." "You have," Ned said softly. "But lies can be cut away, like rot from a tree." Robert walked to the balcony and looked at the dark city below. If I confront her and I am wrong, I lose my queen. If I am right, I lose everything. You still have your name, Ned said, and your throne, but only if you act now. Robert closed his eyes. For the first time in many years, he was not the loud, laughing king. He was the warrior from the rebellion, the man who fought for love and honor. Very well, Robert said slowly. Tomorrow I will not drink, I will not hunt, I will summon the small council, and I will test this queen of mine. Ned felt a small sense of hope, but in the shadows of the Red Keep, secrets had ears, and somewhere Cersei Lannister was already smiling. If Robert was about to wake up, the Queen would not let him wake easily. The game had just begun. Morning came heavy and grey over King's Landing. The sky looked like it was holding its breath, and so was the Red Keep. For the first time in many years, King Robert Baratheon did not wake with wine in his hand. He did not call for food or women or music. He sat alone in his chamber, staring at the stag sigil carved into the wooden table. His head was clear, and that scared him more than any battle ever had. Ned Stark entered quietly. "You look like a man riding to war," Ned said. Robert gave a dry smile. "I'd rather face 10,000 swords than this." Ned stepped closer. "Truth is its own kind of battle." Robert nodded slowly. "Summon them." Within the hour, the small council gathered in the Tower of the Hand. The long table felt colder than usual. Around it sat Petyr Baelish, smiling like a fox. Varys, calm and watchful, Grand Maester Pycelle shaking slightly, Renly Baratheon looking bored, and finally Queen Cersei Lannister dressed in deep red and gold. She looked beautiful, calm, powerful, too calm. "My king," Cersei said smoothly as she sat down, "you look serious today. Should I be worried?" Robert did not smile back. Perhaps her green eyes moved to Ned for a second. Just a second. But Ned saw it. She knew something had changed. Robert stood up instead of sitting. "I have called this meeting to ask a simple question." The room was silent. He looked directly at Cersei. "Are my children truly mine?" The words fell like a blade hitting stone. Renly almost laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when he saw Robert's face, the smile died. Varys folded his hands. Littlefinger's eyes lit up with interest. Cersei did not flinch. "What kind of question is that?" she asked softly. "The kind that demands a clear answer," Robert replied. Cersei leaned back. "Of course they are yours. What madness has filled your head?" Robert's jaw tightened. "Madness or truth?" Ned stepped forward. "The blood of House Baratheon is strong. Every child in your line for hundreds of years has had black hair. Your so-called sons have none of it." Pycelle cleared his throat nervously. "Genetics can be unpredictable, my lord." Robert slammed his fist on the table. "Not that unpredictable." Cersei's eyes turned cold. "You insult me in front of the court. You question my honor. I question your loyalty," Robert shot back. There it was, the fire. Cersei stood slowly. "If you doubt me, bring proof. Or is this another one of your drunken suspicions?" "I am not drunk," Robert said quietly. "Not today." For the first time, a small shadow crossed her face. Littlefinger leaned forward. "Your Grace, these are dangerous accusations. The realm needs stability. The realm needs truth," Ned said sharply. Varys finally spoke, his voice soft as silk. "Perhaps a private investigation would be wise." Quietly, without alarming the city. Robert looked at him. "You already know something, don't you?" Varys lowered his eyes. "I know that whispers grow louder each day." Cersei's gaze snapped toward Varys, but he did not meet it. Robert turned back to Cersei. "Swear it, on your father's life, On your children's lives. Cersei did not hesitate. I swear. But Ned noticed something. She swore on everything except the gods. Robert noticed too. Bring Joffrey here, Robert ordered. A guard hurried out. Minutes later, Prince Joffrey entered, dressed in fine clothes, looking annoyed. "Father," he said sharply, "why was I summoned?" Robert studied him closely. The golden hair, the sharp green eyes, the cruel smile that did not look like his. "Come here," Robert said. Joffrey walked forward, confused. Robert grabbed the boy's chin roughly and turned his face toward the light. There was no Baratheon in that face, only Lannister. Cersei stepped forward. "You are hurting him." Robert released Joffrey slowly. "Leave us," he told the prince. When the boy was gone, Robert looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. "I want guards placed on the Queen's chambers," he said loudly. "No one enters or leaves without my command." The room exploded with tension. "You cannot be serious," Cersei said, her calm mask finally breaking. "I am your queen." "And I am your king," Robert answered. Renly stood up. "Brother, think carefully." "I have thought for too long already," Robert roared. Ned felt something shift in the air. This was no longer suspicion. This was the start of war. Cersei's face hardened. The softness was gone. "You are making a mistake," she said quietly. Robert looked at her with new eyes. "No, I think I finally stopped making one." Guards entered the room. They hesitated, unsure. "Do it," Robert commanded. As they moved toward Cersei, she did not scream. She did not beg. She simply smiled. "You think you've won?" she whispered to Robert. "You have no idea what you've just started." Ned felt a chill run down his spine, because in that moment he understood something terrible. The Queen had been ready for this, and somewhere in the Red Keep, another plan was already moving. The game was no longer quiet. It had become deadly. The Red Keep changed that day. It did not happen loudly. There were no bells ringing, no public announcements. But inside the stone walls, everyone felt it. The air itself seemed sharper, like a sword pulled halfway from its sheath. Queen Cersei was not thrown into a dungeon. Robert was not foolish enough for that. Instead, she was placed under royal watch in her own chambers. 2 guards stood outside her door at all times. Not Lannister guards. Baratheon men from Storm's End, loyal to the king. But loyalty in King's Landing was like gold. It could change hands very quickly. Ned Stark stood beside Robert in the throne room later that evening. The Iron Throne loomed above them, dark and cruel. "She is too calm," Robert muttered. "She is dangerous when calm," Robert muttered. "She is dangerous when calm," Ned replied. Robert looked tired but not drunk. That alone made him stronger than he had been in years. If she planned this, then her father is already moving. Ned nodded. "Tywin Lannister does nothing slowly." Far away, in the west, Lord Tywin would not sit idle if his daughter was threatened. And Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, was still in the city. As if summoned by thought, the Golden Knight entered the throne room without waiting to be announced. Jaime Lannister walked like he owned the castle. His white cloak flowed behind him, his hand resting lightly on his sword. "You've placed guards outside my sister's room," Jaime said calmly. "Care to explain?" Robert did not rise from the throne. "Your sister is under suspicion." Jaime's green eyes shifted briefly toward Ned. "Suspicion of what?" "Of treason," Robert answered. The word echoed loudly. Jaime's face did not change, but his fingers tightened slightly on his sword. "You accuse the Queen of treason?" Jaime asked softly. "I question the father of her children," Robert said bluntly. For the first time, a crack appeared in Jaime's confidence. Just a tiny one. Ned stepped forward. "If you know something, Sir Jaime, now would be the time to speak." Jaime laughed lightly. "You Northerners are too serious." This is madness. Robert stood up slowly from the Iron Throne. Is it? The two men stared at each other. Once they had fought on the same side during the rebellion. Now they stood like enemies. You swore an oath to protect me, Robert said. Remember that. I remember my oaths, Jaime replied. Do you? The room grew silent. Guards shifted nervously. Robert descended the steps of the throne. He stood face to face with Jaime. If I find proof, Robert said quietly, there will be consequences. Jaime leaned closer. Be careful, Your Grace. Some truths break more than they fix. And with that, he turned and walked away. Ned watched him go. He knows. Yes, Robert said darkly. And that means she knows we are close. That night, Varys came to visit Ned privately. The eunuch moved silently through the halls like a ghost. My Lord Stark, Varys whispered once they were alone, you have stirred a nest of vipers. I did what was right, Ned answered. Varys gave a small smile. Right and safe are rarely the same in this city. What do you know? Ned asked. Varys folded his hands. Ships have been quietly prepared in the harbor. Lannister men arriving in small numbers, gold moving through hidden channels. The Queen has been preparing for something. For this, Ned said. Perhaps, Varys replied. Or perhaps she always knew this day might come. Ned felt the weight of his choice pressing down on him. Can Robert survive this? Varys tilted his head. That depends. Will he remain sober? Meanwhile, in her guarded chambers, Cersei sat by the window, looking out at the city. She was not afraid. Jaime entered quietly through a hidden passage. The guards outside never saw him. They move faster than we thought, Jaime said. Cersei smiled faintly. Robert has always been slow. It is the wolf who moves him. Ned Stark, Jaime muttered. Yes. Jaime paced. Should we act now? Cersei stood up gracefully. Not yet. Robert thinks he holds power because he sits on the throne. But power is not a chair. It is fear. It is loyalty. It is timing. And do we have that? Jaime asked. Cersei walked toward him, her voice low and cold. We have Joffrey. Jaime understood. If Robert dies, Cersei continued softly, my son becomes king, and who will question a grieving widow? Jaime's jaw tightened. You mean to kill him? Cersei's eyes were like ice. He has hunted long enough. Now it is his turn. Back in the throne room, Robert suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. Just for a second, he brushed it off. I will not hunt tomorrow, he told Ned firmly. I will stay in the city. I will face this like a king. Ned felt relief, but sometimes death does not wait for the hunt. And somewhere in the dark halls of the Red Keep, a cup of wine was being prepared very carefully. The game was no longer about secrets. Now it was about survival. The next morning felt strange, like the calm before a storm. The Red Keep was quieter than usual. Even the servants moved carefully, whispering to one another. News had spread without words. The king and queen were at war. Robert woke early. His head was clear again. No wine, no laughter, no noise. Just heavy thoughts. He stood by the window, staring at the sea. For the first time in years, he felt like the warrior he once was. Strong, awake, angry. A knock came at the door. Enter, Robert said. A young servant stepped inside with a silver tray. On it was a cup of wine. From the kitchens, Your Grace, the boy said nervously. Your usual morning drink. Robert stared at the wine, deep red, almost black. He had drunk thousands of cups like that without thinking. But today, he thought, who sent it? Robert asked. The Queen's kitchens, Your Grace. Robert's eyes darkened. Leave it there, he said. The boy placed it on the table and quickly left. Moments later, Ned Stark entered. You sent for me. Robert pointed at the cup. Look at it. Ned walked closer. It's wine. Yes, but today it feels like more. Ned studied the cup carefully. He remembered Varys' warning. He remembered Cersei's smile. "Don't drink it," Ned said quietly. Robert gave a humorless laugh. "Funny. Yesterday I would have finished it before you even walked in." Ned stepped closer. "Have Maester Pycelle examine it." Robert nodded. He called for guards and ordered the cup taken to the Maester immediately. An hour later, Pycelle returned, sweating heavily. "Well," Robert demanded. The old Maester avoided eye contact. "Your Grace, there appears to be a substance mixed within the wine." Ned's hand went to his sword. "What substance?" Robert asked coldly. "A rare poison, slow-acting. It would have seemed like illness at first, weakness, fever." Silence fell like a blade. Robert's face turned red with rage. "She'd tried to poison me in my own castle." Pycelle quickly raised his hands. "Your Grace, we cannot be certain who ordered it." "Enough!" Robert roared. Ned stepped forward. "We must act now." Robert nodded. "Bring the Queen." Guards rushed to Cersei's chambers. But when they arrived, the doors were open. The room was empty. No queen, no ladies, no servants, only silence. "She's gone," the captain of the guard said, fear in his voice. Robert felt the world shift under his feet. "How?" he demanded. "There's a hidden passage behind the fireplace," the guard said. "We found it open." Ned cursed under his breath. "Jaime," as if on command. Shouts echoed from the courtyard below. Robert and Ned rushed to the balcony. Lannister soldiers were flooding through the gates. Red and gold banners waved in the wind. The gold cloaks, the city guard, were fighting among themselves. Some shouted, "For the king!" Others cried, "For the lion!" Littlefinger stood in the chaos below, smiling faintly. Robert's face twisted with fury. "She planned this." Ned's voice was hard. "This is no longer about suspicion. This is open rebellion." A horn sounded from the outer walls. More Lannister men were entering the city. Robert turned to his captain. "Lock down the Red Keep. Arrest any Lannister you find. Jaime Lannister you find. Jaime Lannister is to be seized immediately." The captain hesitated. "Sir Jaime commands part of the Kingsguard. He commands nothing now," Robert snapped. Suddenly, steel clashed loudly inside the hall behind them. Ned spun around. Jaime Lannister stood there, sword drawn. Two royal guards lay bleeding at his feet. "You should have drunk the wine," Jaime said calmly. Robert grabbed his warhammer from the wall. "So it's true," Robert growled. "You and your sister." Jaime's eyes were cold. "You were never meant to look too closely." Ned drew his sword. The throne room turned into a battlefield. Jaime moved fast, faster than most men could see. He clashed with Ned first, their swords ringing loudly. Sparks flew. Robert charged forward with his hammer, smashing into a pillar as Jaime dodged. Stone cracked and fell. "You betrayed your king!" Robert roared. "I protected my family!" Jaime shot back. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. The Red Keep was under attack from within and without. Ned managed to push Jaime back for a moment. "This ends now." But Jaime was smiling. "You still don't understand," he said softly. From the doorway behind him, more Lannister guards poured into the hall. Robert looked around. His own men were outnumbered. The trap had closed. Cersei had not run. She had started a war. And now, inside the throne room, the fate of the Seven Kingdoms would be decided not by whispers, but by blood. Robert lifted his hammer high. Ned tightened his grip on his sword. Jaime stepped back into a fighting stance. The first real battle of this new war had begun. Steel screamed against steel as the throne room turned into chaos. Robert Baratheon swung his warhammer with full force. The heavy weapon crushed a Lannister guard's shield like it was made of paper. The man flew backward, blood spilling across the marble floor. Ned fought beside him, his sword moving with calm control. He was not as strong as Robert, not as fast as Jaime, but he was steady. Every strike had purpose. Jaime Lannister stood in the center of it all, golden armor shining under the torchlight. He moved like a dancer in the middle of a storm, his blade flashing left and right. "You should have stayed in the north, Stark," Jaime called as their swords clashed again. "And you should have remembered your oath." Ned shot back. Behind them, more Lannister soldiers rushed in. The red and gold banners were now visible through the broken doors of the throne room. Outside in the courtyard, the fighting was spreading. Robert roared like a wounded beast. "Traitors, all of you!" He charged at Jaime directly this time. Jaime barely blocked the hammer with his sword. The force pushed him to one knee. His arm shook under the weight. Robert raised the hammer again. But suddenly, an arrow flew across the room. It hit Robert in the shoulder. The king staggered back, dropping to one knee. "Robert!" Ned shouted. Jaime quickly rolled away and stood up again. The arrow had come from one of the balcony towers above. A hidden Lannister archer. Blood soaked into Robert's tunic, but instead of falling, he grabbed the arrow and snapped it off with a growl. "You think that will stop me?" he yelled. Ned stepped in front of Robert as more arrows flew. "Fall back! We need to regroup!" More of Robert's loyal men were now entering the throne room. Baratheon soldiers, some gold cloaks still loyal to the king, and even Renly Baratheon with his own guards. Renly rushed to his brother's side. "Gods, Robert, you're bleeding!" "I bled worse," Robert grunted. Jaime saw the numbers changing. His smile faded slightly. From behind the Lannister line, a calm voice echoed. "Enough." The fighting slowed. Queen Cersei walked into the throne room as if she were entering a feast hall. Her dress was no longer soft red, it was deep crimson, like fresh blood. Her golden hair shined in the firelight. Her face was cold and steady. Behind her stood more Lannister soldiers. "Robert," she said softly, looking at his wounded shoulder. "You look unwell." Robert forced himself to stand tall despite the blood running down his arm. "You tried to poison me." Cersei tooted her head slightly. "Did I?" "The wine was poisoned," Ned said firmly. "And you assume it was me?" she asked calmly. "This castle is full of enemies." Robert's breathing was heavy, but his eyes burned with anger. "Enough lies. Tell them." Cersei's gaze shifted across the room, to the guards, to Renly, to Littlefinger, who had quietly slipped inside, and finally back to Robert. "You want truth," she said quietly. She stepped forward. "Yes," she said clearly, "Joffrey is not your son." The words hit the room like thunder. Renly's face went pale. Some guards gasped. Even Ned felt the weight of hearing it spoken aloud. Robert stared at her in disbelief, not because he didn't suspect it, but because she admitted it so easily. "All three of them," Cersei continued. "None are yours." Robert's hand tightened around his hammer until his knuckles turned white. "You treasonous," he began. "I did what I had to do," Cersei interrupted. "You were a drunk, a fool, a man still dreaming of a dead woman. You never loved me. Why should I give you my loyalty?" Robert's face twisted with pain, not just anger. "You could have killed me any time," she added calmly. "But I let you live. That was mercy." "Mercy?" Robert roared. Jaime stepped beside his sister. "The throne belongs to Joffrey now." Ned stepped forward. "He has no claim. Heather has. No how is the only claim that matters," Cersei replied. At that moment, more horns sounded outside, but these horns were different. A deep, powerful sound rolled through the city walls. Varys hurried into the hall, slightly out of breath. "Your Grace," he said quickly, "Stannis Baratheon's fleet has entered Blackwater Bay." The room froze. "Stannis?" Renly whispered. Cersei's eyes narrowed for the first time. "Yes," Varys continued. "He claims the throne as Robert's true heir." Robert slowly turned toward the open doors, where smoke from the city battles could be seen rising into the sky. "So," Robert said quietly, "the whole realm chooses today." Ned looked at him carefully. "What will you do?" Robert lifted his hammer again, despite the blood on his shoulder. "I will not die as a fool," he said. "I will die as a king, or live as one." Outside, the sound of ships' cannons and soldiers shouting filled the air. Inside the throne room, 3 lions, 2 wolves, and a wounded stag stood facing each other. The war was no longer secret. It was no longer quiet, and it was no longer just about a marriage. It was about who would sit on the Iron Throne. The horns from Blackwater Bay did not stop. They echoed through the city like the voice of fate itself. Every man inside the throne room understood what it meant. Stannis Baratheon had not come to watch. He had come to claim. Smoke began rising thicker beyond the castle walls. Bells started ringing wildly across King's Landing. The city was breaking apart. Robert stood tall despite the blood soaking his sleeve. His breathing was heavy, but his eyes were clear, clearer than they had been in years. "So my brother comes for my crown," he muttered. "He comes for what he believes is his by law," Ned said carefully. Jaime gave a short laugh. "Law? The law changes with whoever wins." Cersei turned to Jaime sharply. "Enough talking. We move now." She looked at Robert one last time, not with love, not even with hate, but with cold calculation. "You cannot fight 2 wars at once," she said. "My father's men hold half the city. Stannis holds the sea. You are bleeding. Step aside, Robert. Name Joffrey your heir publicly, and I may let you live out your days hunting in the Stormlands." The offer hung in the air. Robert's face slowly darkened. "You would spare me?" "For the sake of the realm," Cersei replied smoothly. Renly looked disgusted. "For the sake of your son, you mean." Cersei ignored him. Ned stepped closer to Robert and whispered, "She needs time. If you refuse, she will try to kill you before Stannis reaches the gates." Robert gave a bitter smile. "Let her try." Another loud explosion shook the castle walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. Varys hurried back into the hall again. "The outer harbor is burning. Stannis' ships are attacking the Lannister fleet directly." Cersei's calm mask cracked slightly. "That fleet was under my command." "Yes," Varys replied softly, "and Stannis does not forgive easily." Jaime stepped forward. "We end this now." He pointed his sword toward Robert. "One stroke, that's all it takes." The throne room tensed again. Blood still stained the floor from the earlier fight. But this time, something unexpected happened. The doors behind Robert burst open. Hundreds of armored men in black and gold rushed in. Stormland soldiers. Behind them walked a tall, hard-faced man in dark armor. Stannis Baratheon himself. His eyes were like cold iron. "Brother," Stannis said flatly. The entire room froze. Robert stared at him in disbelief. "You move fast." "I move correctly," Stannis answered. His soldiers quickly surrounded the throne room, pointing spears at both Lannisters and Baratheons alike. Cersei's face went pale for the first time. "How did you get inside the gates?" "Gold cloaks are loyal to whoever pays them," Stannis said. "And I pay better." Littlefinger quietly slipped backward toward a pillar, smiling faintly at the chaos. Jaime tightened his grip on his sword, but he now saw the numbers clearly. They were outmatched. Stannis stepped forward, looking directly at Cersei. "Your children are abominations born of incest," he said coldly. "They have no claim." Gasps filled the room. Cersei's voice turned sharp. "Careful! Truth does not fear your anger," Stannis replied. Robert suddenly laughed, loud and rough. "You always did love rules, Stannis. I love dross." "You always did love rules, Stannis." "I love justice," Stannis said. Robert looked between Cersei and Stannis. For the first time, he saw the path clearly. "Ned was right," Robert said slowly. I was blind. He walked toward the Iron Throne and placed one heavy hand on its cold metal arm. I am still king, he said firmly, and I will decide how this ends. Stannis waited. Cersei watched carefully. Jaime stood ready, like a cornered lion. Robert took a deep breath. Cersei Lannister, he declared loudly, you are charged with treason against the crown. You and your brother will stand trial. Jaime almost attacked at those words, but Stannis' soldiers quickly surrounded him with spears. Cersei did not scream. She simply stared at Robert with pure hatred. You think this is victory? She whispered. My father will burn this city to the ground before he kneels. Robert looked tired but determined. Then let him come. Stannis stepped forward. Brother, you are wounded. The realm needs strength. Robert looked at him carefully. You want the throne. It is my right, Stannis replied without shame. Robert turned to Ned. And what would you say, old friend? Ned hesitated. The realm needs stability. If you live, rule with strength. If you fall, the lawful heir must take it. Robert looked at Stannis again. Then he surprised everyone. I will not die today, Robert said firmly, and I will not give up my crown. He pulled himself up onto the Iron Throne despite his injury. The sharp metal cut into his skin, but he did not move. I was a drunk, he admitted loudly, a fool, but no more. The room was silent. Robert's voice thundered across the hall. Today, the lion is chained. Tomorrow, we deal with the rest of the pride. Outside, the war in the city still raged, but inside the throne room, power had shifted again. Cersei and Jaime were disarmed and surrounded. Stannis stood waiting. Ned watched carefully. And Robert Baratheon, bleeding but alive, finally looked like a true king. But the war was far from over, because far in the west, Tywin Lannister had just received a raven, and he was not a man who forgave humiliation. The raven reached Casterly Rock before sunset. Tywin Lannister stood by the window of his great stone hall when the message was placed in his hand. The sea below crashed hard against the cliffs, but the sound did not disturb him. Very little did. He broke the seal calmly. As he read the words, his face did not change. Not when he read that Cersei was arrested, not when he read that Jaime was captured, not even when he read that Robert Baratheon still lived. But the air in the room grew colder. Prepare the banners, Tywin said quietly. The men around him hesitated. My lord, Tywin folded the letter carefully. Call every lord sworn to House Lannister. We march at dawn. In King's Landing, chains echoed in the dark halls beneath the Red Keep. Jaime Lannister sat in a guarded chamber, his hands bound in iron. Even in chains he looked proud. Across from him stood Ned Stark. You look disappointed, Jaime said lightly. I am, Ned replied. It did not have to be this way. Jaime laughed softly. Oh, it always had to be this way. You just refused to see it. Ned studied him carefully. You betrayed your king. I protected my family, Jaime answered sharply. Would you not do the same? Ned thought of his children in Winterfell. For a moment, he said nothing. Jaime noticed. Exactly. Meanwhile, in another chamber, Cersei Lannister sat alone. She was not crying. She was not afraid. A guard opened the door. Robert entered slowly, his shoulder bandaged, but his posture strong. The guards stepped outside, leaving them alone. For a long moment, neither spoke. So, Cersei said finally, you've won. Robert shook his head. No, I've survived. She gave a small, cold smile. Temporary things. Robert walked closer. Why? Cersei's eyes narrowed. You really need to ask. Yes. She stood up. You humiliated me for years. You drank yourself into madness while dreaming of another woman. You never touched me without thinking of her. You think I would give you my children? Robert's jaw tightened. You could have asked for respect. he said quietly. Cersei laughed bitterly. Respect? In this world, respect is taken. Robert looked at her carefully. If I order your execution, Tywin will bring war. He will bring war anyway, Cersei replied. Robert knew she was right. Outside, Stannis and Renly argued in the council chamber. I should be named heir immediately, Stannis said firmly. The law is clear. Renly crossed his arms. The realm does not love you. I do not require love. You require support, Renly shot back. Ned listened quietly. The kingdom stood on the edge of a cliff. Varys stepped forward gently. My lords, if Lord Tywin marches, we face a full rebellion. The city is already weak from today's fighting. Stannis looked at Ned. What would you suggest? Ned spoke slowly. We hold a public trial. Let the realm see the truth. Let the lords witness the Queen's confession. And then, Renly asked, then Robert must make a choice that shows strength without madness. Back in the chamber, Robert stared at Cersei. You confessed in front of the court, he said. You canvassed in front of the court, he said. You gave me power. Cersei's voice was quiet but firm. I gave you chaos. Robert turned toward the door but paused. If I spare you, he said without looking back, you will be sent to Casterly Rock under guard. You will never return to this city. Cersei's eyes flashed. And my son? Robert's voice hardened. Joffrey will not sit on my throne. For the first time, true fear flickered across her face. You would disinherit him. He is not my blood. Silence filled the room. You will regret this, Cersei whispered. Robert walked out without answering. The next day, the throne room filled again, but this time not with swords. Nords from across the city gathered. The gold cloaks stood firm. Stannis stood beside the throne. Ned stood at the king's right hand. Cersei and Jaime were brought forward in chains. Murmurs filled the hall. Robert stood from the Iron Throne. Cersei Lannister has confessed to treason, he declared loudly. Her children are not of my blood. Gasps spread through the crowd. Jaime Lannister has broken sacred vows as a knight of the Kingsguard. Jaime did not lower his head. Robert looked over the crowd. I could order death. The room held its breath. But death is quick, Robert continued, and this betrayal deserves to be remembered. He raised his voice. Cersei Lannister is stripped of her title and sent back to her father in shame. Jaime Lannister is stripped of his white cloak and sent to the wall. Shock spread everywhere. Jaime's smile finally disappeared. Cersei's face turned pale with rage. You send a lion to freeze, Jaime said quietly. You broke your oath, Robert replied. Now you will take another. Stannis watched silently. Renly looked surprised. Ned felt something shift in the realm again. This was not mercy. It was strategy. Tywin Lannister would not ignore this insult. War was coming. But this time, Robert Baratheon was awake, and the Seven Kingdoms were about to change forever. The sentence spread across the Seven Kingdoms faster than wildfire. Cersei Lannister, once Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, was being escorted west under heavy guard. Jaime Lannister, the famous Kingslayer, was stripped of his white cloak and marched north in chains toward the wall, and Robert Baratheon still sat on the Iron Throne. King's Landing felt different now. Tense, waiting, in the throne room, Robert stood with Ned Stark, Stannis, and Renly. No wine rested in his hand. His shoulder was healing, but the scar would remain, a reminder of how close he had come to death. He will not accept this, Stannis said flatly. They all knew who he meant, Tywin Lannister. As if summoned by his name, a rider burst into the courtyard below. A banner of crimson and gold flew behind him. The lion had arrived, not Tywin himself, but his message. The letter was short. You have shamed my house. You have imprisoned my son. You have dishonored my daughter. I will answer this insult in kind. Signed, Tywin Lannister. Robert crushed the letter in his fist. "So be it," he muttered. Ned stepped closer. "We must prepare the north. My bannerman will answer if called." Stannis nodded. "Dragonstone's fleet will control the sea." Renly added, "The Stormlands will stand with you, brother." For the first time in years, Robert looked like the leader of a united house. But inside him, something had changed too. "I trusted beauty over truth," Robert said quietly. "I chose gold over honor." Ned met his eyes. "You chose wrongly once. You chose rightly now." Outside the city, Lannister armies were already gathering. Westermen knights sharpened their swords. War drums echoed across the hills of the Westerlands, and in a guarded carriage moving toward Casterly Rock, Cersei sat in silence. She was no longer queen, but her pride had not faded. "You think this is defeat," she whispered to herself. "But lions do not forget." Jaime, meanwhile, rode north under heavy escort. The Golden Knight now wore simple armor, his white cloak gone. One of the guards looked at him carefully. "Never thought I'd see the Kingslayer in chains." Jaime smirked faintly. "Neither did I." But inside, something burned. He had lost his sword, his honor, his sister's power. His honor, his sister's power. Yet he was still alive, and alive men could change fate. Back in King's Landing, the people gathered in the streets whispering. Some praised Robert for his strength. Others feared Tywin's revenge. Varys approached the throne quietly that evening. "You have done something rare, Your Grace," he said softly. "And what is that?" Robert asked. "You surprised everyone." Robert gave a dry smile. "Even myself." Varys' eyes were calm. "War will come, but this time you will not face it drunk." Robert looked down at his scarred hands. "No," he said firmly. "This time I fight as a king." Days later, word arrived. Tywin Lannister had declared open rebellion. His armies marched east. The banners of the Lion filled the roads. Robert stood on the walls of King's Landing, looking toward the horizon. Ned stood beside him. "This will not be a small fight," Ned said. "It never was," Robert replied. He turned to Ned. "You stopped me from trusting the wrong queen," Robert said quietly. "You saved my life." Ned shook his head. "You saved yourself." Robert laughed softly. "Maybe." Trumpets sounded across the city as Baratheon and Stark banners were raised high. Soldiers filled the streets preparing for battle. Blacksmiths worked day and night. Ships lined the harbor. The realm was dividing. Not over whispers this time, but over clear truth. Robert Baratheon, once a careless king drowning in wine, now stood awake and ready. He had lost a wife. He had lost the illusion of his children, but he had regained his strength. As the sun set behind the city, Robert lifted his warhammer and looked toward the west. "Let the lion come," he said. Beside him, Ned Stark felt something he had not felt in a long time inside this city. Hope. The Game of Thrones had not ended, but it had changed. Because this time the stag was no longer blind, and the Seven Kingdoms would never be the same again.